Onboarding. Welcome to my new series Onboarding, where I want to talk about the beginnings, the first glance, getting to know a new game, the tutorials. How games are trying to draw the players in, how they teach their mechanics. I want to discuss the good, the bad and the ugly, and how to do better. This is episode number 1 featuring Hollow Knight and Dark Souls. Today we are talking about core mechanics. Dark Souls and Hollow Knight are quite different games, but they have enough in common that a comparison makes sense. Both games rely on movement, combat, exploration, surprises, and skill, a lot of skill. But even details match. The soul system, benches and bonfires, charms and rings. Foremost, there is an abundance of systems and quite a bit to teach. When you start to create a tutorial and there is an enormous pile of mechanics, you can't dump them on the players all at once. So you have to ask yourself, what is the core? What are the basic principles? And what to teach first? Let's make a list and compare Hollow Knight to Dark Souls. Both are very physical games where you are traversing intricate paths full of enemies, labyrinths, fascinating places with shortcuts and hidden doors. Movement is key. Combat as well. These are hostile places. But you get rewards for beating enemies. Soul and Geo in Hollow Knight, and souls and loot in Dark Souls. It's good advice to ask yourself, what are the most important mechanics in my game? What is the basic toolset? The minimum a player has to know before they can start. Let's have a look at Hollow Knight first and how the game achieves this. Hollow Knight starts with a bleak room full of void. There's nothing to distract, and that's an invitation. The focus lies on the little knight in the middle, waiting for us to receive our inputs. And the only thing that makes any sense is moving. To make a comparison easy, I'm talking about the PlayStation version of both games. You can see there's no prompt here. That's because console players know to use the left analog stick for movement. Further explanation is not needed. Instead, the game tries to encourage active experimentation. Pushing the stick down or up moves the camera. I believe most players won't discover this feature in this section because to trigger the movement you have to hold the stick for a while. At this point most players will move to the right. Everybody knows walking right means progress. But sorry Team Sherry, I won't obey. I'm an explorer at heart and I know my games. You have always to keep in mind that experienced players play differently than newbies. Reading the developer's mind is a never-ending cat-and-mouse game. Personally, I've learned my lesson with Limbo. Going left on the start screen will be magically rewarded. Team Sherry, the developers of Hollow Knight, know this and try to play it clever. There's no fence and no invisible wall. Nothing hinders you to go left. Instead, you will reach a secret room introduced by the ringing of a bell. Team Sherry is giving you content tailored to experienced players. And this early on, they set the mood and plant the seed in your brain that this is a game of exploration. The first thing you will notice is a shiny pile of Geo in the middle of the room. The reward for your curiosity. It's a powerful hook to catch your attention. It whispers, try something out. The player is tempted to take their fate in their own hands. They will mash the buttons on the controller just to see what will happen. And ooh, surprise, square is attack. No explanation needed. This is the fine art of tutorial. But we are not done yet. There is another curious thing in the room, the shaft to nowhere. I can feel the player's brain screaming, maybe you could go up there. On PlayStation, jumping is mapped to the X button by convention. Most games follow this standard and Hollow Knight is no exception. so the player has a good chance to guess right and discover jumping. It's fascinating how much this tiny section of the game teaches you without words. It's a little sandbox area tucked away in a much more linear tutorial. So, let's jump back to the standard path. On this side we reach a locked door. This incentivizes players to turn back, go left and maybe discover the hidden area. But if you stay, after a while a button prompt appears. Square is attack. You can try the attack on the door and the door breaks. No danger, you have plenty of time to learn. Placing enemies here would be very distracting because you couldn't focus on learning. So you learned that square is attack, but the game developers want you to remember that. So they are placing 2 additional doors here on the right. But no harm done, destroying doors is really fun. Now we are prepared for a real enemy and here it is. Context is king when you are learning abilities. It's good to learn the attack when you want to attack, when you want to open the door, when you want to use the skill. This little headshot means danger. The game gives me a lot of feedback to deduce this. And it's quite clear, running away from it is not a good option. I should attack. And when I'm attacking, the game leaves no doubt that this approach is working. You can feel the impact. Success. The geo mechanic is not explained explicitly. You can collect the coins after an enemy dies. And I really think there's no need to explain it at this point because it comes quite naturally. One last bit is missing, the jump. But fear not, we are going there right away. Do you see the pit? This is a very basic technique, forcing the player to learn new skills. As soon as I'm entering the pit, I can't leave it anymore without jumping, so I have to learn the jump. The game gives me time to try it out by myself or to wait for the prompt. And now there's a very important part regarding Hollow Knight. Most games have jumping. Some don't, like The Last of Us Part 1. But jumping in Hollow Knight differs from other games, and it's vital that the player learns how it differs. See the little hold over the X symbol? That's the difference. When you hold the X button in Hollow Knight, you are jumping longer. If you only tap it, you are jumping shorter. So the time you're in the air corresponds to the time you hold the button. The developer team Sherry dug this pit with this particular height and these particular dimensions only for that reason. If you only tap the button, you can't leave the pit. But if you're holding it, your jump is high enough to leave. Another enemy and a door to reinforce all we have learned. We know all basic skills now, moving, attacking and jumping, and we are good to go. That's not the end of the tutorial, but a good point to switch to Dark Souls for a comparison. Dark Souls starts with a clear goal, a bright, glowing light. The player stands up, and what you don't see anymore is the light, the object of your desire. And that's a clever trick to force the player to either move or move the camera. As in Hollow Knight, the player has to do the first step without a prompt, because using the left analog stick is common knowledge. As you will see immediately, Dark Souls relies heavily on messages and small, short prompts. As you do your first steps, you get the message press X to pillage corpse. These prompts don't disappear after the tutorial and will stay with you throughout the game. Similarly to Hollow Knight, there is not much to do in the first room. Sometimes here are messages, but these messages are from other players, so let's disregard them for now. And because you can't open the door, the only thing left of interest is the glowing light. So you press X and pick it up and learn the pick up mechanic, and that you get to know what the light is after you have picked it up. It's a key. The only way left is through the door, and the game funnels you into a tunnel. That is very comparable to the structure of Hollow Knight. Here you discover other closed doors that look very similar to the first one. But you have learned if a door can open, it will have a prompt. You can now reason that the opposite may be also true. No prompt, no door to open. Giving the player hints what not to do is a powerful teaching technique. But be aware, if you disallow something in the tutorial, the players might never try that specific action again. At this point, the game introduces the orange messages. That can be confusing because in the game these messages are messages from real other players, but at this point in the game they are hints from the developers. But to be honest, that's not a big stumbling block. The first message gives away the camera controls. That's an okayish choice. Chronologically it makes sense, but it may be not the most important piece of information you can get at this moment. Next up is attack, R1. I agree that's the most important piece of information you can get in Dark Souls. And yes, you can try it out on the first very passive, pitiful creature. This scene is equivalent to the doors and the hedgehog, and because we don't have the doors, the enemy has to be passive. So I have time to learn the mechanic. Nevertheless, it's a little bit odd because I don't get the feeling, the emotion. I don't have the incentive to attack. I only attack because, well, there is a dummy and I have a weapon. Next up is the strong attack, R2, and another dummy. It's not obvious what's the difference between the normal attack and the heavy attack. If you have eagle eyes, you spotted the normal attack made 13 damage and the heavy attack now 16. But we are not done yet. Now we have analog stick, hold, circle equals dash, and that gets a little bit more complicated. Even so complicated that I didn't do it right, but started to roll instead. That happens when you tap the circle. My problem with the part is, why would I like to run here? It could be nice to dash up the stairs, yes, but that's a rather weak incentive. I'd really prefer something more emotional. You put the player into a dead end, so they have to backtrack. Let's say they have to revisit a long, boring corridor. That's where a running option would come in handy. Interestingly enough, the remake of Demon's Souls does something along these lines. And here see is another prompt, and I struggle to fit my explanation into the time slot. This is target lock. Okay, that could be helpful if I knew what target lock was, maybe from other games. But why would I use it here? And how do I activate it? Okay, by pressing R3, but that's a problem too. Let's take a step back and recap. We learned movement with the left analog stick. We learned to pick up things with the button, with X. Then again we learned we can use the right analog sticks for the camera. We can use the R1 button for attack and the R2 button for strong attack. Okay. I get that. And then I have to use a combination left stick and holding circle. That's a totally different gesture. Yet, and then I have target lock. That is a mechanic that is totally different. And the button is R3 that's pressing the analog stick, and it gets confusing. And, well, it's likely that I can remember everything I've been taught until now, but now to keep that in my head, short-term memory is overwhelmed fast, and it's beginning here. And with target lock, the game does an even worse job compared to running. In this fight, against this dummy in the water pit, target lock is completely useless. You won't tell your grandchildren, when the first time I played Dark Souls, I went into this basin of water, and there was a guy, and I had target lock, and that was the only possibility to beat him. No, you forget it immediately. If you are experienced, you know that a feature like target lock can exist, and maybe you will keep it in the back of your head. Would it be good to find a better spot in the tutorial to teach target lock? I don't think so. I believe you could teach it later in the game. Well, I know. They want you to use it in the first boss fight. But I don't think that's a good idea because it's the wrong strategy for this particular boss fight. But stop, I'm getting ahead of me. The last message in this first part introduces us to bonfires. It only tells us that we can use them to replenish health. Bonfires can do so much more, but it's a very good decision to leave all the other stuff out of the tutorial. Remember, we just want to get the player up and running. Now comes the part where you put the learned skills to a test. And that's a little bit weird. You see this big door in front of you and it tells you two things. Congratulations, you accomplished something. And beware, big things are waiting. For new users, it's a fake battle. Yes, you can use the attack, you can use the heavy attack, you even can use target lock. But you won't get far with the ridiculous weapon you got. The solution to the problem is to flee. There is a door opening left in the background, and that is a great use case for dashing. Only problem, now that you need the button combination for dashing, you may have forgotten it. It's complicated and unusual. And that's a pity because the scene is perfect to learn the running ability. Because in fact, that's what you have to do. Imagine you fight the monster for a while and then spot the orange message in one corner of the room. It's really tough to go there to read it. And the hint is, hey, that's how to dash. And you see the door where you have to go and you use the dash ability to get away. And the monster is throwing its whole body in your direction and you reach the door with your last breath. The body of the monster slams against the wall, but you are safe. That would be the emotional impact I want to have when I learn things. Core mechanics. This is the comparison between the first part of the tutorial of Hollow Knight and the first part of the tutorial of Dark Souls. We've seen a whole palette of different techniques, choosing what to include and what to leave out of the tutorial. Trust the player's beforehand knowledge. Let them experiment. Reduce distractions. Force specific actions. Repetition. Blocking the sight. Prompts and messages. Teaching what the player can't do. Emotional investment. In this series, we want to talk about these and a lot more. I hope you enjoyed the first episode and I hope to see you again. I'm Marcel and I'm out. Bye bye.